Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Swalwell from California for his 5 minutes question.
Congress.
Mr. Secretary, you want to respond to that?
Can I take 20 seconds?
Yep.
To say that we are doing nothing is an absolute falsehood. We are taking it to the cartels. Do I think that nearly 58,000 fentanyl overdose deaths in 2020 are quote unquote justifiable? This department has worked to stop the trafficking of narcotics since its very inception. And we both know very well that the drug problem in this country requires a two-pronged approach to address the supply and to address the demand. And this fight continues, and we are taking it to the cartels in an unprecedented way. And Operation Blue Lotus that we launched in the middle of March is one powerful example of what we are doing to only increase our effort to address this scourge that is killing so many Americans. But to say that we are doing nothing is unequivocally false.
Mr. Secretary, you oversee one of the largest law enforcement personnel in America. Is it the position of the Biden administration to fund or defund the police?
It is to fund the police.
And does that include to also train them to catch the bad guys and also not to harm the good guys?
Congressman, that is the sworn oath of officers.
And you would agree that unlike any time before in our history, police officers are in danger today. They have a target on their back, violence committed against them.
Congressman, I know that law enforcement officers are under tremendous attack.
And do you think go ahead, do you think anti-police rhetoric hurts morale or helps morale as you're trying to recruit people to be law enforcement officers?
Congressman, it hurts morale, and that is why it is so important that law enforcement leaders continue to communicate the nobility of the law enforcement profession. I'm very proud to say that.
And does anti-police rhetoric put targets on the back of law enforcement for their safety?
Congressman, it does.
That's why I'm disturbed about a recent tweet from the former president that says Republicans in Congress should defund the Department of Justice and the FBI. I'm also concerned about people on this committee and their own anti-police rhetoric. This is a defund the FBI campaign effort. Again, thousands of FBI agents who work hard every day to take bad guys off the streets. In fact, after the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, someone armed to the teeth went to an FBI field office to try and kill FBI agents. I'm also concerned that the chairman of the Judiciary Committee invited a witness. When you could have any person who walks this earth as a chairman of a committee to come in and testify, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee invited the author of this tweet.
Will the gentleman yield?
F
Will the gentleman
cops.
yield? Will the gentleman yield?
Mr. Chairman,
Personal inquiry.
He's not yielding.
I'm not
the gentleman is recognized.
So it concerns me that there is this anti-police rhetoric that's happening among some in the MAGA Republican Party because they vote against police funding that was included in the COVID relief package. They vote against police reform efforts that would put millions of dollars in community police officers on our street. They vote and are against the union protections that allow them to collectively bargain. And as we honor the hundreds of January 6 officers who were hurt that day, too many of them gave comfort and aid at the DC jail. I also want to ask, is anti-Semitism on the rise in America, Mr. Secretary?
Congressman, yes, it is.
And are we seeing increases in violence toward Jewish Americans?
Congressman, yes, we are, and we are seeing that for other minority groups as well.
And so when an influencer like Kanye West, who has millions of followers on social media, says that he's going to declare DEFCON 3 on the Jews, do you think that increases threats to Jewish Americans or decreases threats?
Words like that increase the threat to minority groups, Congressman.
And that's why it surprises me that the chairman of the Judiciary Committee tweeted out, Kanye, Elon, Trump. Well, we know what Trump thinks about law enforcement and what is happening in law enforcement right now with targets on their back. But this tweet was kept up for months after Kanye West said that he was going to declare DEFCON 3 on the Jews. Mr. Secretary, do you believe that all of us have a responsibility to elevate our rhetoric and to denounce anti-Semitism and anti-police rhetoric in this country so that Jewish Americans and police officers can be safer?
I was kind of shocked just
Thank
how
you, and I yield
much the FBI is used by the Trumpy Trumps as a political football. Never really actually homing in on one specific complaint about the FBI, but it's just a huge cloud of garbage. So we are doing a comparison, compare how Eric Swalwell talks about the FBI in comparison to Marjorie Taylor and Matt Gaetz. Comment section all yours.
As you may have seen on the news, the reports have come out, and it turns out that everything we have been saying is true. Today, FBI Director Christopher Wray brought the FD 1023 form that he first didn't want to admit existed, but he brought it today here over to Congress, to our Oversight Committee, and showed the 1023 form to James Comer and to Congressman Raskin. And there were attorneys in the room. Here's what everyone needs to understand. Here's the story. There's two people you need to know about. There's a whistleblower and there is an informant. Now, years ago, an informant brought forward the information, and that's his job. An informant brings information to our government because it's critical to the national security of the United States. This informant brought the information, they filled out the 1023 form, and they told us that our president, Joe Biden, when he was vice president of the United States, that he was taking millions of dollars in exchange for foreign policy decisions. This is pay to play. This is abuse of power. This is an impeachable offense. So this informant did the right thing. This is what he is paid to do. I want you to understand, our FBI director, our FBI did nothing with it. The Department of Justice did nothing with it. And do you want to know why? It's because they're protecting Joe Biden. Christopher Wray and Merrick Garland, Christopher Wray, our FBI director, Merrick Garland, the U.S. Attorney General for the United States, they are protecting their boss. They are covering up his crimes and his family's crimes because there's a lot more to this. Now, we've had a brave whistleblower come forward through Senator Grassley and tell us this information. We already know what it is. We already know it's true. And now today, it is confirmed because Chairman Jamie Comer and Congressman Raskin both saw the form, saw the information. Here's the issue. We're going to have to hold Christopher Wray in contempt of Congress because he refuses to hand over the form. This form is unclassified. He has no reason to not hand it over. The names are redacted, protecting everyone's security. What is the use of an informant if you do not use the information that they give the government? This is absurd. This is ridiculous. What are we going to do? We have two sides here. We have people that are hiding the truth and protecting Joe Biden. And then we have the other side, that's us trying to provide the truth to the American people. And here's the real issue. Do you know the real problem? We are now a country involved in a war in Ukraine. And this is the country where all these problems exist. This is where the corruption began. This is where it all starts and it all stems from. And the Biden family expanded it to many other countries. I want America to know the truth, and Christopher Wray needs to do the right thing. He needs to hand over the 1023 form.
Thanks. Ready? Am I good to go? You're good. Great. Mr. Uriarte, how many witnesses has Chairman Jordan demanded that the FBI send for a transcribed interview?
Congressman, thanks for the question. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I'm trying to read very small print here, but I think it is about 20.
And how many have appeared?
As I said, we made 8 current employees available for 9 transcribed interviews.
And broadly speaking, what type of prep is required before a witness can appear for a transcribed interview?
Well, as you know, I'm sure, many of the people who they're asking to appear are career special agents at the FBI who don't regularly deal with Congress as part of their day-to-day jobs. And so, they want to have a conversation with someone in my office, in the Office of Congressional Affairs at the FBI, to understand what this interaction looks like, to understand what types of questions they may get, to be able to ensure that the information they're providing to Congress is accurate. I think that is in not only the FBI and the department's interest, but also in Congress's interest to make sure that those engagements are as fruitful as possible. And that takes dozens of hours just to get one person available for a transcribed interview.
Right, well, Mr. Uriarte, please pass along to the Department of Justice my gratitude, and I actually think the gratitude of most of my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, for what law enforcement does every day. The way I see it, I mean, you all are working very hard to take down the bad guys. You catch the terrorists, you catch the bank robbers, you catch the people that exploit children, you go after people that abuse COVID funds, and we're seeing billions of dollars of abuse there, and you're making sure that there's integrity, in public service. And so thank you for doing that. I don't want to defund you. The chairman of this committee wants to defund you, and he and others are raising money off the idea of defunding the police. I don't want to do that. I also just sit here stunned after this hearing. Again, so if they're the Cleveland Browns, they've lost another game en route to a 0-16 season by the end of next year. But I still don't understand now, and it was not explained to me by Chairman Jordan or anyone, a part of this committee, why they're not with Bill Barr anymore. Again, just to recap, Jim Jordan loves Bill Barr. Bill Barr is doing the Lord's work, Jim Jordan said. Thank God for Bill Barr. I mean, it's biblical when it comes to Jim Jordan and Bill Barr. Bill Barr is pursuing the truth, exactly what Americans want from their Attorney General. So what does Bill Barr think about the Mar-a-Lago raid, which Jim Jordan and others are upset about, and the reason they've dragged the Department of Justice here? Again, Bill Barr thinks the effort to present Trump as a victim in the Mar-a-Lago document affair is a cynical political propaganda exercise. He says Trump's toast. And Barr said just this month the government acted responsibly, and it was Donald J. Trump who acted irresponsibly. So I don't know what happened. I can only assume that when it comes to Bill Barr, Jim Jordan is all in until Bill Barr departs with the one client that this committee fights for every day, and that's Donald Trump. And that's too bad. That's too bad because, as we have seen, Donald Trump has no regard for the law, and anyone who defends him is going to be a foot soldier and a footnote in history books that chronicle his corruption. And I yield back.
But I would like to remind, I'd like to remind everyone that while we're talking about white supremacy, Ms. Spitalnik, you were talking about white supremacy.
It's Spitalnik.
Oh, I apologize, Spitalnik. Ms. Spitalnik, while you were talking about white supremacists and abortion, I totally agree with you. There's a lot of white supremacists in the abortion movement and abortionists because they have murdered over 20 million black babies in America since Roe versus Wade in 1973. That's on average 900 black babies are aborted. They're ripped apart inside their mother's wombs. So I would agree with you. That could be labeled white supremacy, or we could just label it murder. And it should never be happening. So if you want to talk about white supremacy and the abortion movement, you should really analyze that in your human rights groups that you run as you collect donations from people with your nonprofit. Because I think that is something extremely important to talk about, is the right for those black babies to have lives as American citizens, the right for them to be born, the right for them to be given a chance to live as free Americans instead of murder. You think this is funny, Ms. Spitalnik? Is this funny to you? Is babies being murdered in the womb funny to you? Because you're smirking and laughing at me right now.
What's not funny are the Black people and Hispanic people and Jewish people and Muslim people who have been murdered in synagogue, in church, in supermarkets, in mosques by white supremacists.
Are you aware that all colored people are murdered? That is a fact, that every single color person has been murdered. That's not unusual. It's not just that people of color are murdered. White people are murdered too. Murder is not just for minorities. That may be a shock to you because you seem to dive deeply into all kinds of misinformation and seem to be uninformed yourself. But if you're going to talk about white supremacy and abortion, you need to study very hard about who the targets are. And it's not just Black women, and it's not just Black babies, it's Hispanics as well. And I think that's important for you to understand. And if you apparently care about human rights and you care about studying extremism, let's have a little talk about extremism, shall we? I think that's important because that's what this hearing is all about. I'd like to inform you, or maybe you don't know, maybe you do know, I doubt it. You mostly care about white supremacists and white-wing extremism. But there's quite a pattern of left-wing violent protests on college campuses today. Ms. Gaines here was a victim of it. Do you support what they did to Ms. Gaines? These trans terrorists chasing her into a room, do you support their movement?
I am absolutely sorry that Ms. Gaines felt threatened and unsafe while she was on a college campus, and that's not acceptable. But again, the statistics tell us that when it comes to politically motivated violence, in 2022, every single murder was committed by a right-wing extremist.
Every single murder in America was committed by a right-wing extremist?
Every single politically motivated murder was committed by a right-wing extremist.
Are you sure about that?
I am
are you aware that the Tennessee shooter just recently identified as a man and she was a biological woman? Was she a right-wing extremist as well?
Gentlelady's time has expired. I'll allow the witness to answer the question.
So that was a shooting that happened in 2023. There is no evidence as to what ideology motivated that shooting. And what we do know is that cisgender males are responsible for the vast majority of mass shootings in this country.
I'm sorry, I don't know what a cisgender male is. There's only two genders. It's male and female. That would be that. So no one knows what a cisgender male is. It's a made up.
Unfortunately, the anti-trans invasion
from Georgia
language that you've been using
yields back. I
does
recognize
nothing but
Mr. Strong for his
normalize the
5
issues we're
minutes of
talking about
questioning.
here today.
Beg your pardon, Mr. Ezell, I missed you over there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Erickson, as a sheriff and a police chief and a law enforcement professional.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The FBI wants a massive new complex for their Washington, D.C. area-based activities. They want to spend more than $300 million on that complex, though the FBI has an employee base that's about 2.3% of the United States military. Mr. Speaker, they're literally asking for something that is larger than the Pentagon for the FBI. And so my amendment would disallow any planning, spending, distribution of funds for that purpose. I don't believe that the FBI deserves a massive new headquarters or Washington field office. The activities inside of Washington, the greater Washington metro area, have really driven a lot of the investigative work we have done. It's not bad folks from the FBI out at some field office in middle America or elsewhere in the country. It is the Washington, D.C. based activities that have pressured other field offices for no good law enforcement reason. It's the D.C. based entities that have suppressed credible investigative leads into criminal conduct over the objections of other bureaus and offices. And they've initiated investigations into American citizens merely for engaging in constitutionally protected speech. They've attempted to entrap members of the United States Senate by holding false classified briefings. That's testimony we got from Senators Grassley and Senator Johnson. They've also worked hard to censor factual information harmful to their preferred political candidates, notably the Hunter Biden laptop story that the FBI based in the D.C. metro area were involved in cajoling censorship of. Building a new headquarters would condone, reinforce, and enable the Washington field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's nefarious behavior. We shouldn't do it, and we should adopt this amendment to ensure that's the case. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I claim the time in opposition.
Gentleman is recognized.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Womack.
Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my thanks to the minority side for giving me an opportunity to speak. I rise in opposition to the gentleman from Florida's amendment. We're not always going to hate the FBI. I realize there are people on my side of the aisle that don't like some of the activities of the FBI. I'm not going to pick an argument on that. But what I will argue is that it is bad policy for the Congress to be taking steps to deny a federal agency that is in serious need, in my opinion, of an improvement to their headquarters. Now, notice I said improvement. I didn't say some massive, big expansion necessarily. But what I do know is that when I toured the FBI headquarters, I saw it in a state of disrepair that is going to need the attention of the owners of that property, and that's us. And so to deny the FBI the opportunity to be able to explore other alternatives, I think is a bit short-sighted. Give me an additional 30 seconds.
Additional 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Gentleman's recognized.
The fact is the building is crumbling, and there's going to be a need to do something. What that something is, I'm not an expert on. But I think it would be wrong for us to be taking this action today, pursuant to this amendment, without having at least a hearing and an opportunity for the people responsible for the facilities, FBI, GSA, any other stakeholder, to be able to help us understand what the situation is today and what the needs are of tomorrow. That discussion can take place, should take place, but I think it's a bit short-sighted and premature for us to be taking the action that this amendment would call for here today, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it is not my grave concern that the FBI's building is crumbling. It is my grave concern that the civil liberties of Americans are crumbling, and I wish we were more worried about that and less worried about whether or not we got new carpet and wallpaper at the FBI building. My colleague from Arkansas says that the FBI headquarters is in a state of disrepair. Mr. Speaker, it is the FBI itself that is in a state of disrepair. And so while my colleague from Arkansas may be right that we may not always hate the FBI, how about while we are most concerned about the things they are doing, we not go build them a new $300 million building? My colleague says there needs to be a hearing. Well, let me tell you about the hearing that mattered to me, and frankly, many of my Democrat colleagues who are also worried about civil liberties. The hearing where we learned that the FBI has conducted over 278,000 illegal queries on the FISA system. Or the hearing that said that the Inspector General found that 38 times an hour these people were violating FISA. The notion that we would stand here and defend them, frankly, is deeply disappointing, and I think those folks deserve to sit in the rat-infested J. Edgar Hoover building until they get their act straight with America's civil liberties. I reserve.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I thank my friend for yielding. I thank the chairman for his comments. And I understand what the gentleman, Mr. Gaetz, is saying, and his ire is directed at people. The people will be transitory. People come and go, members come and go from the Congress of the United States. What will not be transitory is the ability to have a critically important agency for us in the long term to carry out its duty, which is, after all, to defend America, our Constitution, from enemies both foreign and domestic, and their duties have been changed to a significant degree since 9/11. So what this structure that is proposed to be built is supposed to do is to accommodate not only the fact that the present building is falling down and is dangerous to those who work there, some of whom are clerical people not making any decisions with respect to policy. And I would think the gentleman would be concerned about their safety, as am I, and as the chairman, and the safety of those, frankly, who walk around the building. because if the gentleman visited there, he's going to see netting around the building because the concrete is falling off the building. So I would share, obviously, the chairman's view, and I'm not totally objective. They're going to build it somewhere in this region. I live in this region. I'm supportive of this region. But I think to transfer ire against the people who are in positions in the FBI at this point in time. But this building, when and if it's built, is going to be built sometime in the future, but is absolutely essential. And FBI directors preceding the present FBI director for a number of times have said this is needed. Experts have said it's needed. The GSA says it's needed. And I would hope that we would not, because of the temporary displeasure or ire or anger or stronger feeling, if you want to express it, of the present occupants or the actions they are taking, would not adversely reflect on the judgment as to whether or not a new Capitol facility for a critically important agency is necessary at this time. So I would hope the gentleman would withdraw his amendment. I don't expect that to happen. And if it doesn't withdraw it, I hope it's defeated, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Where I think Leader Hoyer is correct is that this effort would be incomplete in the absence of major reforms to FISA and the other authorities that are abused no matter who the people are. But the people have changed and the corruption has remained the same at the FBI. Under Republican and Democrat leadership, we've seen consistent abuses of America's civil liberties, and to take tax money away from our fellow Americans who are the victims at times of these abuses and then build a new center for the FBI seems deeply unwise to me. I'll yield.
Gentleman yields.
I don't want any misinterpretation that I adopted the gentleman's premise as to the activities of the FBI. I disagree with it.
I appreciate that clarification, and I don't think anyone would confuse your views with mine as it relates to the FBI.
Thank God for that. But let me say that in the concept of what we're doing, this is necessary. Forgetting about any of the other issues. I understand what you're saying. I disagree with you, but I appreciate your position and why you're saying it. But to be so, in my opinion, short-sighted that we delay further. This building has been delayed. The first request for new facilities was 2009. So we're now talking a decade and a half, essentially.
Yeah.
So that was my point. But I don't want to be confused that I adopt your premise on the FBI activities.
Well, I appreciate the distinction, and I am grateful that there are a number of Democrats like Ms. Lofgren and Mr. Nadler who are working very closely with Republicans to try to reform these authorities so that people's Fourth Amendment rights are violated, but doing that alongside creating some new $300 million monstrosity for the FBI that is quite literally larger than the Pentagon sends entirely the wrong message, and that would support adoption of this amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.